Hello, philosophy students. This is a video to introduce to you the idea of mind mapping in order to learn. We have kind of a natural start to mind mapping in this class because Plato and Socrates, or more accurately said, Plato's divided line, is in a way a sort of mind map. So you'll find the divided line more or less in this form in the divided line help sheet. So you can open that and check that out if you like. And then what I will do as a person who's getting ready to mind map is open up my key terms to Socrates and Plato, and that's in week 2. Okay, so if I look at my key terms, I can see we have in the divided line so many of the concepts that we must mind map. So we've got the idea of forms, higher forms, lower forms, objects, images, understanding, reasoning, sense perception, imagination, opinion, knowledge, the world of becoming, metaphysics, and epistemology, and the highest form. Okay, so right there are quite a few of the concepts that we have listed that I'm asking you to mind map. So I think they're good ones to start with. However, I noticed last term that many people were having a hard time mind mapping into their Plato-Socrates map their model, which is the teleological model. Now, for them and for Descartes, because their model assumes action in a way, it might be wise to start with their model. So the teleological model is the idea that we as human beings, endowed with mind and reason, have a chance to travel a road to go to a presupposed endpoint or goal. Okay, that's the teleological model. Socrates and Plato do share this model with the later philosopher Descartes, so you will see it again. Now, for Plato and Socrates, they do have an assumed end, and for them, we are trying to get as close as possible to the highest form, which is also called being for this class. In ethics, we use its other name, which is the good. Okay, but for us, I want you to think of being. This is a primary philosophical concept, even though it seems so simple. Okay, being for Plato and Socrates is the highest form, which means it is the most complete, the most perfect, the most trustworthy of all forms and reality. Okay, and we're aiming to kind of get as close to that as we can according to their philosophy. Okay. Now what I'm going to do, since mind mapping involves different colors, is I'm going to choose a color for epistemology and a color for metaphysics. And then, if I can find my yellow, the parts of them that are above the Great Divide, as Plato calls it, I'm going to embellish with yellow, and I'll explain why as we go. All right, so according to Plato, we're all born into the world of becoming. So we don't have a choice. We start in this world of becoming with images. Okay, and with objects. Okay, Now, images and objects are from the world of becoming. Now, as we're little children, the reality of being born into the world of images and objects kind of awaken in us an epistemological ability, a knowing ability that our minds hold. Okay. Now, the corresponding epistemological category to images is imagination. Okay. Now, for Plato and Socrates, imagination is what helps extract knowledge from images. I know we have a very different definition of it today, and it has changed definitions quite a bit over the course of philosophy, but right now we're looking at Plato and Socrates' view of the word imagination. Okay. The ability that we have to extract knowledge from objects is our sense perception, or our five senses. So we can see here, I'm going to put epistemology in the same color as the concepts that correspond to epistemology. And then over here, I'll put metaphysics. Since pink is the color for things that I'm going to put in metaphysics. Okay. Now, also, if we look at the allegory of the cave, which is a story Plato tells in the same book, The Republic, that the divided line comes from, that allegory lines up with the divided line. And it adds to, for us, another notion here, that the world of becoming is like a cave. Okay. For Plato and Socrates, they believe that we are equipped to jump across a great divide. Okay? We don't have to stay in the cave. We don't have to stay in the world of becoming. Okay? We can move on, and we can learn to tune into what he calls lower forms, and also higher forms. We do this, for example, when we go to school and we learn rules of grammar, or any rules in math. Rules are abstract. And so we learn to go away from this physical world into the abstract world of formulas. Okay, that's where we get the word formula, is from forms. Okay, so it's completely abstract when we say the word forms. But lower forms are forms that also have a physical manifestation. So the idea table is a lower form, but this table that I'm working on here is the object table. Now, for Plato and Socrates, the idea table, or the form of tableness, exists before any actual table existed. Okay? We could tap into the idea of a table, according to Plato and Socrates, using our ability of reason or rational thinking. Okay? But that's not quite enough to get information from the higher forms. There, on the epistemological side, we need to evoke our ability to understand. Okay? So This is where Plato and Socrates want us spending most of our life. Okay? Tapping into the lower forms and especially the higher forms to really understand what is going on. Okay? Because according to them, this world of caves, where we only can use our imagination and sense perception, this only leads us to mere opinions. Whereas once we learn to tap into reason and understanding, they say we get to true knowledge. Whoops, went kind of away. There we go. Okay. So this part in yellow is, again, where they want us to spend our time. He calls the lower forms and the higher forms together the world of forms. And then again, corresponding to the allegory of the cave, the world of forms is when the prisoner comes out to the surface, no longer stuck in the cave. Okay. So from our reading in the Phaedo, we can add some of these other terms from the key terms of Plato and Socrates. One such term is composite, and another is non-composite. Okay. So let's go to our purple pen, purple pink. Objects are composites. Okay. Forms are non-composites. So composites mean made up of multiple parts and therefore can be torn apart, where a non-composite is a unity that cannot be torn apart. Okay. Another term from the Phaedo is recollection. Now this is a good one. This is a little tricky to get in here. And I think what I'm going to do is just follow my teleological line, maybe with a brand new color. Let's use navy. Okay, and I'm going to say this process of moving from imagination and images to sense perception and objects, getting into reason and the lower forms, and then getting into the higher forms. This is what recollection is. Okay, so I'm just going to maybe tap out here. The process of recollection. And I'm going to put, to be specific, recollecting the forms, because that's what he means by recollection specifically. He talks about two different kinds of recollection. One in which unlike things remind us of, okay, one thing that isn't like another still reminds us of it. So he uses the example of best friends in the Phaedo. I can't remember who, Cebes and someone else are best friends, so you don't think of one. If you run into one of them, you always think of the other. Or if you see a guitar that somebody always plays, this person is always playing the guitar, but now you see the guitar without that person, you think it's the person. Now, the person isn't like the guitar, but they can help you recollect, right, one another. So one example of this in the Phaedo is we have experiences here on earth that are imperfect, but they remind us of the perfect forms. So for example, you have an experience where someone misuses the word equal. Perhaps, they gave you a slice of cake and said, this is equal to your sibling's slice of cake. And you're like, no, it isn't. So sometimes equalness in our experience is imperfect. However, the idea of the equal or equalness, that stays the same forever. It's an idea that doesn't change according to Plato and Socrates. Okay? So even though we have an imperfect experience of it, it can remind us of the perfect form. And in that case, the equal is a higher form because it does not have any kind of physical manifestation. I can't buy you equalness for your birthday. All right, let me go through my list here, and I'm going to see if I got all the words. Well, we can label, this whole thing, kind of the divided line. So I'll call it the divided line plus, since we have more terms in there. Okay, looking through. Oh, I got one. Okay, there are two that I didn't get. The first one is rational objective knowledge. Okay, so that's going to be easy for us because everything in yellow here is rational objective knowledge. Because rational objective knowledge refers to the rationalists, which Plato and Socrates are. Rationalists believe objective knowledge must be purely abstract principles of the mind and formulas that only reason and understanding can digest. Okay? So perhaps to give an example, so one example of a higher form are numbers and also functions. So if we take something like 12 plus 18 equals 30, okay, that is a higher form, as are all the numbers, because numbers are pure ideas that we simply created marks to represent these ideas, okay? The idea of addition is a higher form. There's not a concrete thing called addition. Same thing with equals. So this whole formula is rational objective knowledge, as would be any mathematics and any symbolic logic. Okay. Symbolic logic uses only symbols. And so just like math, it is purely formula. Okay. The other term that I forgot was idealism. Okay. So for Plato and Socrates, they are definitely idealists. Now, people say the divided line is Plato nudging toward a dualism. My disagreement comes from how he treats the world of becoming. Plato found no value in it. In fact, if you were to read the whole Phaedo, you would read like a full-page diatribe where Plato has Socrates saying how worthless it is to study the natural world. So for him, he really believes this cave or this world of becoming isn't really real. This is the really real, okay? Later, Descartes will give the physical world a little bit more value, even though, like Plato, he will say, first we must understand the objective, the rational objective realm before we can make sense of the physical world. So Descartes is way more of a dualist because he said this world of becoming, this world that we're born into, does have value. We just have to know how to approach it, okay? Where Plato is basically saying, don't study this world. Study the forms. They're the real. Okay. So idealism is when you think the abstract, the ideal, is the only reality. And I'm going to say, for Plato, that is the case. So because he says the world of forms is really the only true world, this is idealism, a metaphysical stance that says only the ideal is real. Okay? The world of forms is abstract, it is ideal. And if you look at that, we get our word idea from ideal, which comes from the Greek eidos, which was a word for forms. Okay? So their metaphysical stance is idealism because they believe the world of forms is the only true reality. And with that, I have captured all of the key concepts from Plato and Socrates, and this would be the mind map that I would turn in. Okay? This is not the right mind map or the only mind map. I only wanted to do this because I had a professional mind map video up here and people didn't say it was very helpful. So I wanted to kind of do an example of Plato and Socrates mind map so you can get an idea. But please don't think you have to do it like this. But notice how I made sure all the terms were connected. And see my arrows, see how they're connecting. My color coding, all this color is epistemology. All this color is metaphysics. When we get into the, say, ideal world or the world where Plato wants us in, I've got that in yellow because that is rational, objective knowledge. That's where it comes from. As well as idealism is their metaphysical stance that only the ideal is real. So hopefully this example mind map will make you less afraid to give a try. I will say you don't have to have everything right up against each other. You can have little bubbles out as long as you draw lines that connect them or arrows, show that you connect them. But notice how I do use color differently in order to make my groupings clear. And hopefully, if you have questions, you will feel like you can ask me. Okay, that is it for now. Thank you for hanging in there.